Okay everyone, welcome back my coding peeps. This one, not sure how long it's going to be, haven't fully thought it out yet, but what we're going to start off with is looking at a solution to our problem where we left off last time. So just to remind you, we had created a modal and loaded that modal in when people clicked on the settings item in Pinegrow to load in, just open Pinegrow up here, to load in the GitHub settings. So again, we just open that up. Just go ahead and clear these out. Actually, we can leave these on for now. So we have a GitHub menu here that when we first open, we have 3 items, the last of which is a settings item. When we click on that, it opens this modal that we put together in Pinegrow that accepts a username and a personal account token. And we have 3 different things down here. We have a clear settings, a save settings, and a cancel. And when we last left off, there was a couple problems. One, should just point out really quickly, in the settings menu, the X was not aligned correctly, and we have a fix for that. And then the other thing was, now when we open a project, so we'll just go ahead and open this, and we look, we now have these 2 extra menu items that really are about managing changes that we make within a project, along with the already existing ones. So one user, rjs, I really should remember this just off the top of my head now, but I just don't. I think it's rjs weblab, or rjsweblab. Darn. I believe it's rjsweblab. Suggested that, or pointed out that if you go up to the file menu and you say open project in new window, and you go ahead and select some kind of project, then you look at the menu up top. For some reason my Pinegrow is a little slow today. And you look at the menu up top, you'll see that even though we have a project open, we don't have those 2 additional menu items that we want to be in there. And so when we left off, we were trying to figure out how we were going to do that. All right, so here is what, 1 second. Let's go to tutorial 6, pull requests. So I'm just looking back at the pull requests that I had on the last tutorial. So if we just change this from is open to is closed, I could actually just delete this out completely. We see that was a bunch of different pull requests on this. One was from rjsweblab, and I am going to remember this eventually. At any point, they made some suggestions about how to correct this. I went ahead and committed their pull requests into the code. So basically what they suggested is that when we add the plugin control to the top bar, remember that's the one that's going to add in our base menu with the 3 items that we define up here. When we add that in, we still leave that turned on all the time, but for the function, we also check to see if we're opening another project in a new window. So to do that, we use pinegrow.getCurrentProject. So if we don't have a project open, that's going to return null. But if we do have a project open, that should return some project object, some object that contains project information. Basically what we're saying here is if we get something back, if that's true and it returns an object rather than null, then fire the function add to GH menu. And so now if we scroll down, here it is, function add to GH menu. In this case, we're passing in page null and project. That's not really necessary. just because here we're not passing any kind of any kind of parameters into this function, so we can just go ahead and get rid of those. First thing that rjsweblab suggests is that we check to make sure that those elements haven't already been added. So they're basically checking and saying if they do not occur by using the exclamation point before it. If we don't find an element by ID of stage changes, then go ahead and fire this. So in this case, we're getting the target menu, which again has an ID of GH dropdown. If we look up here, one second, where is that? Oh, right here, GH dash dropdown. So we're going to get that element. Then we're going to create a document fragment and then populate that fragment with our two list items. So create a list item. To that list item, add an inner HTML of the link that we want to add in. Append that to new items, our document fragment. Then create the next menu item. Set the inner HTML. Append that to the document fragment again. Then we grab the divider that is up here, this HR with an ID of ruler-1. And go ahead and, I'm just going to correct this real quick. Go ahead and from the target menu, grab our children and use the named item ruler1, and then insert the new items, that document fragment we just created just before the menu divider. Then after that, go ahead and fire our add additional listeners function to actually add the click listeners to these two guys. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to start working on basically making the settings modal functional. So just to remind people, go ahead and open that up. We have this modal, and it's just basically a template fragment that we're loading onto the page. It's written, and here's where I had the mistake. I was thinking that Pinegrow was in Bootstrap 4. It's actually not. It's written in Bootstrap 3, that main editing page. And so one little quirk, I think, basically I just don't understand it well enough why, but one of the little things about Bootstrap is for the modal in Bootstrap 3, you need to have, by the way they style them, you have to have the close button before your modal header in order to get it to display correctly. So basically this needs to get moved here. Oops. And then the other thing is, rather than using an X there, it's better to use the Unicode of n times semicolon. So let's just go ahead and save the current changes that we've made really quickly and load them into Pinegrow. So we are on this one, so we're going to unload this, we're going to load a new plugin, and we have this saved as tutorial 6 right now. Open that up, target our JavaScript file, hit open, add it in, and now we're going to close this down and restart. We should be okay. I don't know if I did anything to break that in the meantime. All right, so now we're back up. No errors down here except an already in use error, and that's not a big deal. I'm just going to make this a little smaller. Let's make this bigger. All right. So now let's just go ahead and open a project. So we can see we have all 4 of our menu items in our settings. If we look at the settings now, we have our X in the right place. It's not sticking down below. And if we open in a new window, this is the first time I've done this. I haven't tested this yet, actually. It just looks like it should work. Just grab another project, open that up. That's also going to open a new console. So this sometimes happens right here, unchecked runtime last error. Don't worry about it. It's nothing you have to worry about. It's behind the scenes and doesn't affect the running of Pinegrow. And our menu now has all 4 just like we expect. So the other thing that we want to make sure is that when we close this window, that it doesn't impact the menu on our other project, so it doesn't remove these 2 guys. So let's first close this project. Let's check our menu. Okay, our menu is good. The 2 items got removed. Now if we, just gonna move this over here, check this one, we still have all 4. So it didn't remove them from both projects, only from the project, or only from the instance of Pinegrow where we close that project out. So that's good. All right, so let's move forward now. Let's go back over to Visual Studio Code. So, click listeners. So so right now we ran this as soon as the first function, or the first thing that gets fired after we add the menu in, is we fire add settings modal. The add settings modal is going to create the div and load in the modal from the file that we saved back here in our plugin directory. Then this is going to return back. And then the next thing that it's going to do is it's going to make a call out to add initial listeners. And in that add initial listeners, we're going to want to add 3 different click listeners. So we already made up a add additional listeners function that added the click listener for the settings modal .modal show. So now I think what we're going to want to do is at the end of the add settings, we want to make sure that all the items are there. Add initial listeners. Do we want to do it at that point? Sorry, talking out loud. Or do we want to do it here? I guess we want to do it. No, we should do it. Let's add it in here. Let's add a new function. So now at this point, now that we're sure that we have the modal container, the modal added into the modal container, we can now grab we can now target those fields, those form fields that we made, and the buttons. So just to remind ourselves, so there's 2 form fields, the form control label, the username, and the GitHub token. Let's change this. Let's make sure that we're specifying what we want there. Okay, so now we have these 2. Oh, one thing we should do. Let's open a new branch. All right, there we go. Okay, so we have the GitHub username and the GitHub token. Okay, everything is still staged, so we're okay. good. Let's split the window. I'm having troubles keeping track. View. And split right. Let's go back to this one. Okay, so we need a new function that is going to add click listeners to these guys, and basically what it's going to do is when these are clicked, it's going to do something with these two forms. So let's call the function all right, manipulate settings field, and let's go ahead and just throw that here. So it's going to do a couple of things. So function to populate and function to populate settings with the existing values. So if there's values out there, you want them filled into the forms. We want to also be able to clear settings. And then finally, we want to be able to save new settings. So right now I'm getting a video error. Is it still streaming okay? I don't have any errors in my streaming software, just a little bit of complaints from YouTube. So we're just gonna hope. Okay, so we have this new function. So what do we call it? Manipulate settings fields. Jeez. We're not passing in any parameters. Whoops. I'm an idiot. All right, so now we have our base function set up. So the first thing we're going to want to do is, I guess, grab our two different form fields. So let username equal get element by ID, and then GitHub username let the account token element by ID. This time we're getting the token. And then we need to get each of the buttons. So let's see, the first one is clear button. Let's be a little bit more explicit with that. What did we get? GitHub clear settings. Document. Whoops. Jesus. Sweet, 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 sweet. Fine. Did I make a mistake? I don't think so. Sorry, trying to type too quickly and save settings. And finally, actually, you know what? We don't have to do anything for the third button because the third button is part of Bootstrap, and it's just going to clear. It's just going to clear naturally, close out the modal, and we're not going to actually do anything to our settings. So it's just those two. Okay, so I guess the first thing that we have to do is, okay, let's talk for a second about how we're going to store the actual variables. And so I think the way we're going to do it, and the way that Pinegrow does it, is we're going to use local storage. So let's just take a quick look at local storage within Pinegrow. So if we come over to Pinegrow, pull up the inspector, and then we go over to application. And you can see I've been looking at these before. But under storage, there's a couple of different storage. There's local storage, there's session storage, and then there's some different databases that you can interact with. But the big one that we're looking at right now is local storage. And if you look here, you can see that Pinegrow already stores a bunch of stuff in local storage. So for example, you can see right here, the settings code theme is MBO, the settings code font is Fura code that I'm using. So they're already storing a bunch of stuff in there. They prefix theirs with settings and then whatever their setting is. I think we'll prefix ours with GH for GitHub, and then maybe even set GitHub settings or settings-GitHub. We'll decide. Anyway, I think that's where we're going to put them. So unlike session storage, which I think closes out every time you restart Pinegrow, this local storage is going to persist. And it's basically sort of just the way Pinegrow works. It never really will clear out this local storage without you deliberately going in and doing it. So that's seems like it should be a good place to store our stuff. So how do we store stuff into local storage? Let's see, can we close this out? Yeah, we can close this out. So the way we store stuff or get stuff from local storage is by using window dot, I believe, whoops, storage, and then the first parameter that you pass in is the name of the variable you want to store it under, and the second is the value of that variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the username or the token has been already set. So we're going to say if is that right? Or is it .get? Suddenly my brain is mush again. Get item. Do we have to prefix it with window? Actually, we don't. We can do it without prefixing with window. So we can just say local storage get item, and then again we have to figure out what we're going to call them. I guess I'm going to use, let's use gh settings user name. So basically, if that exists, then we are going to set so we already used username for the element. Do we want to change that? Yes. Let's change each of those. All right. So then we're going to want to let username equal this whole thing. So now we grab that, and then if once we grab that, we want to basically set the username field to that. So the way we do that, I was hoping MDN would come up. But basically what we do is we just set the value. So we're just going to say, I was going to show you the MDN page for that, but it didn't come up. So we already have the field that we want, so we set now, if we have gotten the, if the GitHub settings username variable is set, then most likely the, I think we can assume that the account token field is also set. One thing that I've been sort of musing on in the back of my head for some of the things that we've written so far is whether or not we should have done a little bit more error checking. So not sure about that. You know, I'm just thinking about something. Thinking about the whole chaining thing, which I didn't do before. Do we really need to chain this to assign a new variable? No, we don't really. We're not going to use it again. So we can do this. And instead put it here. Yes, that makes more sense. Whoops. So now we do the same with the account field. Set the value. Local storage. Oh, geez. All right. So we're doing essentially the same thing. We're getting the token, the stored token field value, and then assigning it to the field in the form. So when the form pops up, if we already have that set, it's pre-populated. Okay. So now we've got that. So now we want to set click listeners for each of the buttons. So now we've got the values loaded in. If they're there, now we want to be able to actually set them. So our first button is the clear button. So let's do that one first. So we're just going to say clear settings button. And then add event listener. And we're going to want a click. and then we're going to pass in a function. We're going to pass it directly into, we're going to write the function out completely rather than passing in an outside function. I think it's just a little easier. And then all we're going to do is, actually, you know what? I'm not sure. We just look. Okay, so it's just remove item. Or syntax, yeah, remove item. So all we're going to do is then say, and I don't know if you can chain the, if you can, you probably can't remove multiples. At least I don't know if you can. Remove item, and we're going to say GitHub settings user name, and then all right, so that's going to, if anybody clicks on the clear settings button, it's going to just remove the items. If we wanted to get fancy, I suppose we could do something where we store those for an undo. I guess we could. That seems like it would be a little difficult, so maybe we'll ignore that for now. The other thing that I'm not sure about is if you go ahead and remove an item that doesn't exist, do you get an error thrown? I don't know that. So let's go over to Pinegrow. So right now, you guys can probably get my license number from this, but that's okay. So right now we do not have, well, we do have this one, GH for PG user, but we don't have those other two. So we don't have either a GitHub settings username or token. So let's just go ahead and try this. If we do this in the console, what happens? So I'm just going to go right down here in the console, put that command in, hit return. Okay, it just gives me an undefined, so that shouldn't throw an error back. So I think we're okay. We don't have to check to make sure that those items exist before we remove them. Okay, so we've got the clear button done. So we just have one button left to do. So we're going to say save settings button. And add the event listener. Click. And then function. Oops. Just keep it consistent at least. I always struggle a little bit with knowing what the best way. Some people like leaving a space. Some people like leaving a space between the function and the parentheses. Some people like putting the opening bracket of their function on the next line. A lot depends on whose styling sheets you're using. If you're using Airbnb or Google, those are two big ones. But you know, basically, I think the most important thing is just to keep it consistent. All right, so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say local storage set item. In this case, it will be the GitHub settings username, and then we're going to set that to the value of the username field. So again, this is one of those things where I'm kind of making a judgment call. I think if we were doing something in a wider web app, if we were doing something in where this was going to be really exposed to the public in general, I think we would have to do more to make sure that that username field value was valid and wasn't some type of attack on our system. So we would have to purify that in some way. In this case, we're kind of trusting that whoever is using Pinegrow has their own best interests at heart. And since this is only exposed to somebody using Pinegrow, I think we don't really have to worry about the purification there. So feel free to comment on that if you disagree, and we can maybe revisit it if you make a good argument for why. But for right now, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So settings token, and then the same sort of thing where we get the account token field value. All right, I think that should be it. So we've set functions for each of the two buttons, and we're also populating. So let's see if it works. So we're going to jump back over into Pinegrow here. Let's move this out of the way. Let's do a reload. You know what? I want to close this out. This is bugging me. Reload app. And over to the side here, my developer tools window open, no real errors in there, so we're doing good. It's now under our menu. Go to settings. This pops up. There's nothing in there right now. Username, personal account token. Just going to put in tester for now. I'm going to save those settings. And then we're going to close that. Now if we reopen that, they're still there, Bodonkey and tester. Now what happens if we reload? Here's the real test. Did it maintain it through a shutdown and restart of the program? And it did. So we have those two. Now we can try clearing out. So here, that's probably going to confuse users because these fields didn't clear out. Let's see if it actually worked though before we panic. It did not. So I did not get an error. Oh, no. That's weird. Okay, let's see what happened over here in our so what did we say they were? GH settings. Okay, funky. I don't see them over here. Let's try that again. Maybe it's going to persist in the form. Let me go back to here. Let's assume that these values are there. We'll hit save settings and then close this out. Now let's check. Are they in our storage? They are. So get settings, username, settings token. Now if we clear that out, and take a look. Okay, they were right at the bottom, so they have cleared out. So it's just a matter of that the form inputs persisting. So we're going to have to clear those out. So let's go back over into Visual Studio Code. I just got a ding about something, and I'm not sure what. And let's go ahead and update. So first, we want to, when we click the Clear Settings button, we're removing them, but let's also alter our form. So now we want to say user name field value is equal to null, basically empty. I think that should be fine. It's equal to null. The other thing I'm not sure about is, should we have, since there's no indication for us when we click the save, maybe we should use some bootstrap here, right? So right now in our modal, let's go back to the modal. In our modal, our save settings have a class of button primary. Let's pull up bootstrap for a second. Let's make sure we're on, I want all releases, let's bring this over here. Just go to version 3.4 and go to components, and let's go for, I guess just button groups. Actually, I want the, wow, this old documentation is really not good. Let's go to a different version. Let's jump to 4. Can we see what I want a little easier? Customize color. All right, so let's change the button from a primary to a success once we click to save the changes, to indicate to the user that something's actually happened. So with the clear button, when we click it, it'll empty the form. But we want with the save settings for that to change to a success. And then I guess in that case, with the cancel button, we're also going to want to attach a click listener to change this back to our primary. And so I'm just going to go back into Pinegrow really quickly because I want to make sure. Try the button on here real quick, and we're going to jump into the properties panel. So we've now changed that so it's just btn-success. So we have the button here, clear settings button. Here, save settings button. So that's the one we want to do. So let's say, will that work? Okay, they suggest set attribute, so let's do it that way. So then what we can do is you know, actually no, let's not do it by set attribute. Let's do it by class list. So we have to actually do two things. We have to class list, and we're going to remove button primary, and then we're going to add button success. All right, so now that should change our button when the save settings is clicked. But what that means is that we are going to have to add in yet another event listener. So up here, we're going to target that third button. So let's just remind ourselves the third button actually doesn't have an ID, so let's go ahead and add one in. We could actually target it using this data dismiss, but that's a little dangerous. Just, yeah, I think it's better to do. I wonder if we're going to get into any trouble by having this as the generic modal, or if we're going to have to change that. Let's leave it alone for now. But let's just say GitHub cancel settings. All right, so now we have this to be able to grab. Now we'll go back over into here. Let's save that. Go back over into here and say let cancel so the cancel settings, and then down here what was it again? Cancel. Cancel settings button. Add event listener. Click. Function. And so now at this point we're going to let it close out, so we don't have to do anything about that. I think we can let, so one of the things that you sometimes have to be careful about, if you have buttons that have multiple click listeners and multiple functions, you can have a problem with one function interfering with another. And so in that case, what you have to do is you have to capture the event. So you pass in the event to your function, and then you basically prevent it from firing. I don't think we have to do that here. If we have to, we'll revisit. So at this point, the only thing we want to do is say oops. Is basically reverse what we just did. So we're going to remove the button success, and we're going to add back the, so basically we're repriming it so that the user knows that on the next go round they can click on that button again to resave those username and account token. All right, so I kind of like that. Let's see if I have a reason to like that. So we're just going to restart. So right now we do not have the, let's make this a little smaller. Make this a little smaller. So right now we don't have our tokens saved away here. And so now if we go up to our GitHub menu and go down to our settings, okay, that pops up nicely. Bodonkey and our tester. Go ahead and save the settings. Cannot read property add of undefined. So line 78. So it's not passing the save settings button in, I guess. So I think we have to do this. I think. Try this again. Definitely coding under fire. Right, let's see what happens. Cannot read property. Remove of undefined. Same line. 78. Remove. Do. So it's not getting the save settings button, I guess, here. Let's go ahead and just make sure that that's really what's going on and it's not that it can't use class list. Maybe I was wrong to decide on that rather than attribute. Sometimes working with, sometimes I get a little confused. But that doesn't make sense. That should work. Okay, let's see what happens if we just console log it and see what it gives us. Oops, reload. We're going to wrap it up pretty soon. I spent a productive couple of hours earlier out getting my blueberries all gussied up for the season. Got my little bit of nature fix before coming back in and jumping back into the digital world. Alright, it's definitely able to console log that. Just out of curiosity, if we do that same thing here, but I have tons of wood chips yet to spread, and I also have to do something for my actual Pinegrow job, which I need to get on top of. So I really wish this had just worked so I could move on. But it didn't, so let's figure out if we can get it to work in this video. If not, we'll have to work on it on our next one. Cannot access save settings button before initialization. So it's at 63. So, oh, geez, I just pasted it in the wrong place. One more try. So at this point, outside of here, it's giving us Can I pass the event in instead? Does that make sense since I'm working on that one? Let's try this and then we'll explain what we were thinking. Remember I told you that the event, the thing is I'm not sure if that event's an object or the actual element. I should know that. That's should be basic, but now it's a mouse event. You know, actually it might just be fine if, can I chain that? want to see if this works. Oh man. It is so humbling doing live coding and realizing how many things that you know, but under the heat of the moment you forget. It's very, very humbling. No, that's on. Wait. Is this the. No, that's the. How do I pass that in? Or is it just this one? Let me see if I. Let's try this. That's not going to work. Let's try one other thing first. The problem is if I try and set the attribute, it's just, I would have to add the button too. Let's see if that works first. I don't understand why class list isn't working, but we set the button. Just try that. Okay, so that works. So set attribute works. Does class name work? It's really irritating that you can't use class list. Out of curiosity, did that work? I'm not sure that that worked or not. It might not have changed back. Okay, it did. And then the cancel is giving a problem because it's the same thing. So class name works, but for some reason class list didn't. Let me just try one last thing, just because it's bugging me. Do we have to do the chaining different? That doesn't make any sense. Screw it. We'll just stick with class name. Do I want to do it that way? Yeah, let's just do it that way. I'm not completely certain that this is the best way to do it. I'm not sure if class name or set attribute is a better way to do it. But especially when doing multiple class names like this. And I don't know why class list isn't working. So chaining class list. All right, so it looks like to do two, you have to write them. You can't write them as a chain without doing your own custom function. All right, so now we know. So let's just go with class name. Kind of makes sense. So what they're saying is that basically classless methods don't give a return. So the next thing in the chain isn't going to know what to act on. So that's the reason why you have to put it in two separate functions. Let's get rid of this before we forget. And let's get rid of this. So class name. And so in this case we're changing it back. So button primary. All right. So, knock on wood, that should give us what we want now. So let's reload. So right now we do not have our settings there. Oh wait, we do. GitHub settings -username and GitHub settings -token. So we do have them there. So let's see first if clearing our settings works. So clearing settings nicely cleared out our username. It did not clear out the tester from here. It did clear it out from here. So let's fix this. So account token field. Oh, for heavens. So we forgot our value here. Save that. Back in. I think I'm moving too quickly. Uh-oh. Save settings button dot class name is not a function. Save settings button dot class name button primary. So is that because, again, it doesn't have... Let's go ahead and pass it in. Reload. Settings. So there's no GitHub settings right now. So let's go ahead and pass our 2 in. Say save. Save settings button dot class name is not a... Are you kidding me? Didn't we just do this? Fine. I could have swore we just did that. I really could have swore. Oh. I can tell that it is hot and I am tired from the outside work. Let's try not passing it in so it doesn't do something weird. Let's try this once more. And if not, we are going to call it good. So we'll probably get an error here. Reload. Alright, no errors. Do we have our things set? GitHub settings token and GitHub settings username. So both are set, so they should be populated when we open our settings. They are. So let's go ahead and clear them. So they clear out. We have not gotten an error. So change our username. change our account token, the save settings. We can see Bob M and other tests are down here, so it successfully saved them. We've got it as green now, so we can go ahead and cancel. Now if we reopen, hopefully it's going to be blue and have our things filled in. And it is. All right, well, that was a little bit painful today, but not too bad. Still don't get why class lists doesn't work, but that's okay. Class name seems to be working just fine. Again, I don't know if class name really expects you to only pass in a single class name, or if it doesn't mind that you're passing in two different values there, or a longer string value with a space in it. But it worked for us. Okay, so now we've got our settings all up and going. We can access those by using this local storage Git item, just like we did here, to go ahead in any other portion of our program where we need those values. And next time, I guess what we'll do is maybe start doing the rest of our initial listeners. So we'll go ahead and add the listeners for these other two, create repo and clone repo. I think we're starting to get into the area of the program, of the plugin, where we're going to have to deal with OctoKit and the GitHub API. So that might be even rockier going than it already has been with this very basic JavaScript that I obviously have to get at the forefront of my mind a little bit better. But at any point, let's go ahead, make sure that our changes are all committed up. So go ahead and hit, in my case, command return. That's going to ask if we want to stage all of these changes. So we say yes. And then we just have to push it up to GitHub. It'll ask if we want to create a pull request. We'll say yeah. All right, and that's it. So again, if you have any comments, you can leave them on the video, or you can leave them over at GitHub. Again, feel free to go ahead and clone any of the branches and go ahead and try and do some of the coding yourself. Feel free to give me feedback. Let me know if my coding is horrible. Let me know if you're learning something. Let me know if you want me to slow down and cover something a little bit more clearly. Anything. And as usual, thank you for anybody out there watching who submits a pull request. Always willing to look over the code, and if I don't agree, say something back, or if I do agree, then go ahead and pull it into this code. And please subscribe. Let me know that these live coding sessions are actually reaching people. They're a little painful for me because, as you can see, I'm kind of hesitant sometimes. I keep wanting to go back and confirm stuff that really I do know. I'm nervous that I'm going to be telling you something wrong. And so it actually does two things. It slows down my coding when I actually coding, and it also limits when I can code to periods of time when the rest of my family is up and when they don't mind me talking endlessly. So at any point, hope this has been helpful, and just have fun with programming. Get dirty. Thanks.